Hello and good day, Mike Adcock with an update on newly upgraded Severe Tropical Storm Utor, also being called Labuyo in the Philippines. This brief is based on the 3 Zulu JMA advisory package dated 10 August. Taking a look at Severe Tropical Storm Utor at 3Z, JMA placed it 970 kilometers east of Manila. It continues to move west at 10 knots. This is pretty important. I'll touch on that in a moment. Winds 60 knots, gusting to 85. Pressure 975 hectopascal. Do have signal 1 now raised by Pagasa for Cagayan-Isabela-Aurora, Quirino, and Catanduanes there in Bicol. Taking a look at the multispectral imagery, you can see it's really developing, especially this band here to the northwest, really starting to fill in. What you'll notice on the last few frames, though, is an eye starting to form up here on visible satellite. Now, why I think this westward movement is very important, taking a look at the JMA surface analysis, you have, again, our subtropical ridge continuing to move north, or continuing to block to Utor's north. A high pressure centered right over Okinawa. That's going to prevent it from making a great deal of northern progression. Again, you still have troughing over China. Again, newly formed tropical depression just west of Palawan. That's going to entice Utor to move more westerly toward the area of low pressure, where it's going to find less resistance than this high pressure up to its north. And in turn, this is why I start to lose a little confidence in the JMA forecast. This is from 3 Zulu. You can see near term continued westerly track and really west-northwesterly, and then all of a sudden they bring it more northwestward and up and over Cagayan province by Monday afternoon and Monday evening. I'm not quite sold on this this track, and actually JMA is the northern outlier of a lot of the major meteorological agencies in the Western Pacific. I'm just not buying it, especially with this strong high pressure to the north. Taking a look at Pagasa's forecast, they've dropped their track much southward now, now affecting or expecting the landfall in and around Isabela province again come Monday morning. Right now they're looking at rainfall amounts of 5 to 16 millimeters per hour. Of course, we're going to continue to track this. It's not going to be solely a northern Luzon. Bicol will also get involved here in accordance to that signal that was raised by Pagasa. Hong Kong also keeping with more of a southerly track, affecting Isabela on Monday morning. Again, all these agencies are looking at typhoon strength, and really it's going to be sooner than later it becomes a typhoon. Here is Korea's forecast a little further north. This is affecting Cagayan for a landfall, again as a typhoon. Taiwan's Weather Bureau, again a little further south, Isabela. Basically what we're seeing across is a Cagayan to Isabela landfall. Now the one forecast agency that I'm gaining more confidence in, and is the southerly outlier, is the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. They're tracking more of an Isabela to Aurora landfall, and based off the continued westward track, it's starting to seem more and more plausible. Their forecast, they bring it up to 90 knots sustained. Considering that it's 90 knots here out to sea, 90 knots over land, I could see it 95 to 100 by the time it makes landfall. And kind of taking this same graphic and just taking the wind radii and extrapolating it, this is how the wind radii lay out from the JTWC. The blue shading indicates 35 knot winds, yellow indicates 50, and the red is typhoon force winds. You can see a much strong gusty winds are going to affect much of northern Luzon, and you're really looking at portions of Aurora, Cagayan-Isabela, extending through Ilocos, looking at typhoon force winds with this. Alright, so let's take a look at the track guidance. You see a southerly track, or southerly shift in the tracks. Now NavGem, which was taking the storm north of Luzon, now looking at a Cagayan to an Isabela landfall, whereas Avian, GFS or the GFDN, they're tracking more and more southward, actually in line with what JTWC is looking at. Here's also where it gets interesting. We've seen rapid development over the past 12 to 24 hours. Favorable conditions continue to persist. Low shear, great outflow, warm waters. There's really nothing saying that it's going to stop, except for any eyewall replacement cycles that may occur. Now, this intensity guidance was published at 18 Zulu, so at almost like 9 hours later, JMA is saying it's 60 knots. So we're already exceeding what the GFS and the GFDN, and way above what NavGem was forecasting. And we're starting to get into some of these chip ensembles. It's interesting to note that a large majority of them take it to a major typhoon status. Matter of fact, more of them take them to Category 4 status, looking at 120, 125 knots. I'm not saying that I buy into that, but it is something that is very interesting to note. This will be, I feel, a very, very, in terms of intensity, we're going to continue to see intensification at a pretty fast clip. I'm not seeing anything that's going to prevent that or to slow down that intensification trend. So this does look like it's going to be a serious threat to northern Luzon. Alright, so let's take a look at the initial intensity based off of Dvorak. JMA here at the top. Granted, this is from 0Z, but looking at a data T of 3.5, opted to go with the MET, the model expected, as well as pattern, which was 3.0. JMA, they decided to use the convection wrap, which gave them a 1.0 wrap. That's good for 3.5 data T. MET a little lower, 2.5. Pattern really looking sharp, 4.0, which is nearly typhoon strength. They've kept it at 3.5 for their 3Z, which yields that 55 knots in their initial intensity. One of the rare times where you see JMA actually exceed JTWC, and a lot of that has to do with the differences in wind speed measurement. JTWC is measuring in a 1 minute, 1 minute sustained, or 1 minute average. JMA is using the WMO standard of 10 minutes, which would normally yield a reduction of about 14%. Not the case here. National Weather Service is the outlier on the high end, and they used a different technique. What they ended up using, rather than the curved band technique using the log 10, they used an eye technique, which seems very reasonable. You see it on a visible satellite. You see that warming here on Dvorak, and what they looked at is, okay, you've got an elongated light gray eye. It's embedded in light gray, and it's surrounded by this ring of white. So, okay, that starts you off at a 5.0. You subtract half because of that elongated eye. But then you add that back in, that half back in, because of this well-defined banding feature. So that gives them a data T of 5.0, which is clearly typhoon status. They're looking at a pattern of 4.5, again, typhoon status, but they opted, and that's what they went with. Their final was 4.5. They went with this 4.5 based on constraints because of the rapid intensification. So, is it already a typhoon? Possibly. Dvorak, the objective Dvorak, 3.7, which is about 60 knots. Alright, warm waters out there, just going to quickly touch on this, sitting about 30-31 degrees, and that's backed up by some buoys out in the western Pacific, 31 degrees Celsius here. Taking a look at the upper air package, 200 millibars, again, area of high pressure to the northeast. Between that and this area of high pressure west of the Philippines, it set us up with a very, very nice area of diffluence right over the cyclone, helping to improve outflow. At 500 millibars, here's a reflection of our low. Again, here's our depression just west of Palawan. And again, why I'm thinking more westerly than northwesterly is you can see all the subsidence here on water vapor extending all the way through Taiwan and into this area of high pressure in eastern China. Steering flow is pretty much west-northwest toward Luzon. Again, I just don't see the rationale quite yet in a northwesterly track. In 925, again, both of our cyclones showing up rather nicely, and very, very clear skies to the north thanks to that high pressure. Alright, shear. Not really concerned. It's been decreasing. Wind shear is on the order of 5 knots or less, and is really expected to remain 10 knots and below through Monday time frame. May run into some shear as it's crossing Luzon, but really going to be minimal effect. I've been talking about the wind speeds. I do think a typhoon, possibly major typhoon, will be making landfall. That also brings us to the concern of rainfall, where we're looking at 75, at least based on GFS through Tuesday morning, 75 to 125 millimeters in portions of northern Luzon, especially looking at some isolated reports in Isabela through Ilocos of 200 millimeters. Now, we also talked about Catanduanes in Bicol. They're also going to get into this mix. Portions of Bicol and Calabarzon could see 250 to even 300 millimeters based on this GFS forecast. So not only is it going to be very windy, we're also going to see a lot of rainfall, so flash flooding and mudslides are going to be a very big concern as Utor crosses over the Philippine Peninsula. Alright, that concludes our update today on Utor. Of course, you can get this and more analysis over at westernpacificweather.com. You can follow along on Twitter and Facebook as well. Don't hesitate to join in on the global tropical discussion at storm2k.org. Follow me at Twitter at Senior Pepper to get updates in between videos. And thank you for tuning in. Have a great day and take care.